Okay, I'm going to talk about all the special angles on the unit circle. Okay, so in grade 11 you were introduced to the unit circle, and the angles that were on the unit circle followed a special pattern. So it went 0, 30, 45, 60, 90, and then it followed 30, so that's 120, 45, 60, 90, and continuing that pattern you get 210, 225, 240, 270, 300, 315, 330, and 360. Okay, so how do we keep recognizing all those special angles but in radians now? Okay, so the first ones that are the easiest would obviously be the quadrant spots. So this would be 0 radians and pi and 2 pi. And then these are pi divided by 2 and 3 pi divided by 2. Okay, so now let's go into 30 degrees. So 30 degrees is equivalent to pi over 6. Okay, just think about where it is compared to 180. So it's a sixth of 180. Okay, so this one is pi over 6. So when we're 30 degrees into that quadrant, you have to think about pi. So pi is really 6 pi over 6, right? So if you go backwards 1, you're at 5 pi over 6. Okay, so then in that regard, where would this special angle be? At 210, it would then be 1 bigger than 6 pi over 6, so it would be 7 pi over 6. Okay, and the 30 degree reference angle into quadrant 4, you would have to think about going backwards pi over 6, but this time you're going to be using backwards from 360, right, which would be in radians using a reference from 12 pi over 6. Okay, so this would end up being 11 pi over 6. So we can fill in these ones that we know. So now we know pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, and 11 pi over 6. Okay, now let's talk about 45 degrees. So we're going to have 45 degrees into each of the quadrants. So first figure out 45 degrees is pi over, and that would be 4. Okay, so obviously this one's pi over 4. Now, thinking about this in your head, this is really 4 pi over 4, right? So going back would be an angle of 3 pi over 4. And this would be a bigger angle, so it would be 5 pi over 4. And then into quadrant 4, you really have to use the math of using 2 pi there, so you have to use 8 pi over 4 in your head to go backwards. So that angle would be 7 pi over 4. Okay, so that would fill in here. So you can kind of see the pattern here, right? This is one less than being like 4/4 or 6/6. This is one more. And then this one in this quadrant will be one less than being the doubled number. Okay, so let's try the shortcut with using 60 degrees. So 60 degrees is pi over 3 as a radian measurement, because 180 divided by 3 is 60. Okay, so if we go into this quadrant, okay, so a full one would be 3/3, so we're going to be one less than that. Okay, and then in this quadrant, a full one would be, for pi, would be 3/3, so we're one more. So we're 4/3. Okay, and then in this quadrant, you have to think about 2 pi, so that would be 6/3, and we're one less than that. So we're 5/3. And those are all the significant angle measures on the unit circle, but now you know them in radian degrees.